welcome to the Essential Ingredient in Paran, and welcome to our second video of our Christmas series, which today I have Ashley McBean here from Gary's Meats in the Paran market, and she's going to show us how to bone a porchetta and roll it, and also what we can do with the bones afterwards. So you've got your beautiful American ribs, and you can use it for stock and soups and that sort of thing. And then I'm going to show you how to cook it and some accompaniments to go with it.
So here we've got our loin of pork. As you can see, the loin runs along here. You've got the ribs here, and toward this end are the midloin chops. At this end is where we take the pork shoulder, continuing on to the pork ribs, and toward this end is where you'll find our leg of pork, or as most of you know it well, our Christmas ham. This is just it in the piece here. So what I'm going to start with is I'm actually going to run my knife along this backbone here, just to free it up, so that when I do bone this side of the porchetta, then it'll just fall off. There's no stuffing around with these little bones on the end. So I'll just flip our pig over, our little pork loin over here, and get going. So it is a bit awkward to sit it up on its side here, but you want to make sure that it's a really clean cut along that backbone there. So just running your knife along this backbone in here, running that knife along the backbone here, trying to stay as close to the backbone as possible. That way there's less wastage. This one was cut a little off center, but that's all right. We'll get through there. Just making sure we're all the way down onto the rib there. Nice clean cut. All right, now we'll turn him around. I say him, but they're all female pork. All right. Many of you know the pork fillet. That's it here. So I'm going to start the next step by clearing that pork fillet. So just little cuts, only using the tip of your knife. That way you're less likely to cut through the meat. You're more likely to hit the bone, which is exactly what we want to do. So cleared that, come in under there. Normally this will just rip out, but we want it attached so that when we roll our pork belly, you get that beautiful little fillet in there. Remember, hand always at the back of the knife. Bit of an awkward angle here. All right, so these ribs here, we're just gonna clear up along the rib, make sure not leaving any meat behind. Clearing up along this flank here. These are just little cartilage bones here, which we'll take out, but I'll show you at the end. Just exposing all the bone here. Right, so that's your rib cage there. Your final rib is about here, I can feel it. And then leading down toward the tailbone here. Right. I might just flip it around, just so it make my life easier. What you want to do is come in under this little spine bone here, and again pointing your knife toward the bone so that you're not cutting into the meat. The boss will get pretty angry at you if you cut into the meat. All right, flip that one around again. There we are. And now we're going to come in underneath these ribs here. A lot of you may know it as American rib. This is what you tend to marinate with the barbecue sauce and slow cook. So, all right. Clearing this one up here, this last little bone. Again, just using the tip of your knife, not cutting into the meat too far there. Beautiful. Marked all along there. And just lightly running our knife along these ribs here. Can be a bit of a balancing act. And you sort of let the weight of the pork belly do a lot of the work for you. As I'm cutting, it's pulling away from the bone. which makes my life a lot easier and gets you a bit of a cleaner cut as well. So toward here, this is where the bone starts to bend, so you really want to make sure you're only using the tip of your knife, again, not cutting into that loin of pork there. And from that first cut that we made along that backbone, the bone, there's a little lump in the spine. Just want to get on the other side of that lump, and boom, that sort of falls off there, finishing the job just down near this midloin chop here where the fillet was. Beautiful, falls away, easy as that. So we've got your American ribs here. These bones here you can use more as soup bones because they've got a lot of that connective tissue, a lot of gelatin, which is where a lot of the flavour is, so put that to the side. And now, sort of back to where we started, only no bone. So we clean up a little bit of this on cows. This is called suet, so a lot of people use that for Christmas pudding. Yeah, beef suet's perfect for making things like that, pastry. Beautiful. So when we roll our porchetta, we want this loin, this nice lean sort of part, as you can see there. We want that in the middle, and we want the pork belly around the outside because you want the pork belly to nicely slowly cook. You don't want to put too much pressure, too much heat with the inside of the porchetta. So what I'm going to do is actually take a bit of that skin from the outside off, because you don't want the skin on the inside of your porchetta, you want it on the outside to make all that beautiful crackling. I find this is the easiest and the safest way to remove skin. Hand on top of your pork belly, just making sure that you're not tilting your knife upwards, because that's when it becomes quite dangerous. You want it nice and flat with the bench, and you want to leave a little bit of fat on there but not too much. Alright, so as you can see, it's starting to peel away a bit. Go one more there. Just going to test roll it to see. Yeah, that should be enough. So I'm just going to cut that skin off there. Alright. And there you go, bit of extra crackling for Christmas. I'm sure you'll get no complaints there. Flip it back over. And this is when we do the seasoning inside. So you can use whatever you like. You can use chili, salt, pepper, a bit of fennel. What we normally do in the shop is a big handful of salt flakes. And don't be afraid to be generous with this. I don't think I've ever made a porchetta that's been too salty. And the Murray River salt flakes are beautiful too, so no such thing as too much. Bit of pepper, so cracked pepper all through the center. Again, feel free to be generous with this. A little bit of fennel seed there. Some people like the aniseed flavour from the fennel, some don't, so make sure you know your guests. We love it. And then finally, chopped rosemary. A lot of controversy of whether rosemary is good on pork, but we absolutely love it, so trust us. You can also put, depending on dietaries, you can put some minced garlic, lemon rind is beautiful in the porchetta, a bit of olive oil, but for the most part I think you'll be pretty happy with all of this. I like to roll mine up as a test first, just to make sure you're going to get a nice even roll there. So we'll just start here and get a feel for it. Pretty thick on the outside there. Beautiful. So in that case the center was missing a little bit, so that's where I'm going to put my fillet. Right in the center there, just to bulk it out in the center, make it nice even roll, and that seems to have worked pretty well there. We'll start with some string. I like to use nice thick white string, but whatever you got handy. So string under the roll there, pull the string back toward you on your left hand side, come under the string in your right, And then we're going over the initial piece of string and through that loop that you've created, and then under that loop there. Everyone's got a different way of tying, but this one seems to work pretty well for me. And then we've got our little sliding knot there, and you basically just work the string to where you want it to be. Sometimes it can hurt your hand, so you can wrap it around your wrist if you like, get a better grip. But that's pretty good, pretty happy with that one there. Just to lock it off, around, and beautiful. And that is your rolled porchetta. So from here, this is when we would score. So I just start from where the crackle finishes and just don't want to go too far, just scoring lightly into the skin. Beautiful. There you have it, our nice little rolled porchetta. That's all my hard work done. Now I'll just hand you over to Nadia to show you how to cook it.
So here's the pork that we boned out, which I've had in the fridge overnight. I poured some boiling water over the skin and then drained the water out, and I've left it in the fridge overnight so that the skin dries out nicely so we can get a lovely crackling on it. I've got some extra little bits of crackling that we cut off from the belly, and I'm going to cook those a little bit later on too so that we've got extra crackling for everybody. The base of the roast, I'm going to put some onions, some apple. So I've just sliced up some onion, which I'm going to put that on the bottom, some garlic, and some fresh thyme and rosemary. I'm going to chop up my apple, so 3 green apples. And what this will do, will caramelise and cook down while the pork is cooking. We're going to create just a beautiful sort of appley puree to go with our roast. So all of those can go on the tray. Pop a little bit of olive oil on that. I'm also going to put in some fennel seeds and salt. Again, you can be generous with the salt. We're just going to mix that up a little bit. So that's our little bed that's going to sit underneath the roast. I'm going to sit that on top. And what we need is a little bit of oil. We're going to rub that all over the skin. I'm going to salt this as well, so we need to make sure we salt, pretty generous with the salt, nice fine sea salt for this. And I'm going to put just a little bit of water in the bottom of the pan, because that just helps keep everything moist and not letting these dry out too much. So not too much water, you don't want it swimming, just enough to add a little moisture. So we're going to put this in the oven at 240 degrees for 20 minutes, just to allow this to start blistering. And then we're going to turn the oven down to about 160, and we're going to leave that in for another hour to hour and a half. This is about a 2 kilo roll of pork, so you'll need about that much time to cook this. And we also need to allow at least 15 minutes resting time as well before you carve. So while we're waiting for our pork in the oven, we're going to start preparing the potatoes. So we're doing a classic roast potato in duck fat, nice and crispy. So the secret to crispy roast potatoes is to parboil your potatoes. So we are going to pop them on the stove, and we're going to boil them for about 5 to 8 minutes, drain them, and then we'll give them a little bit of a bash about in the strainer, because what that does is creates a rough surface for the oil and the salt to grab onto so that we can get those nice crispy potatoes. Okay, so before we move on to our stuffing, there was a couple of things I just wanted to show you. So our pork, as you can see, has crisped up beautifully. So that's going to go back in the oven now. I just wanted to show you what it looked like after 20 minutes. So that's going to go back in the oven now at 160 for an hour and a half. And we just want it to cook now nice and slowly. You can see that the apple and the onion have started caramelizing beautifully. And there's a tiny little bit of liquid left in the bottom. So I'm just going to leave that like that, because what we'll do later on is deglaze that pan with some verjus and some cider vinegar, and we're going to add some stock and make a beautiful sauce to go with that. So we'll pop that in our reduced heat oven. And then the other thing I'm going to show you is the potatoes. So I've parboiled those, and as you can see, you just give them a bit of a bash, and you can see that they start to rough up a little bit. So that's going to give you crispy outside, and we're going to have nice fluffy potatoes on the inside. So I'm going to put those to the side for the minute because we don't need to roast those yet. We're going to start with our stuffing. So in a pan, I'm going to put some oil, and I'm just going to slowly soften some diced onion. And I also have some rosemary and thyme, which I've chopped up, which are going to go in as well. So because they're a harder herb, they do need to be cooked. So I'm going to leave that on a low heat because I don't want them to burn. I just want them to soften nicely. In another pot, I've had some dried cherries, dried sour cherries, and they've been warmed in a little bit of verjus so that they go nice and soft. So we're going to put that into our stuffing as well. So the best thing to use for your bread stuffing is just some leftover sourdough. So if you've got any half a loaf of sourdough left over, that's perfect. So what we're going to do is take the crust off. I'm going to dice it up. I'm going to put it into my food processor, and we're just going to blend it up to breadcrumbs. You don't want them too fine. You still want a little bit of texture in your stuffing, but fine enough that it's all going to stick together. We can put that in our bowl. We're going to add cracked pepper and some sea salt. So I'm now going to add my onion to my breadcrumbs. And what I want to do is we're going to add a little bit of melted butter as well to this. So in the same pan that you had your onions in, we're going to melt some butter. While we're waiting for that, I've got my cranberries, which are now cooled. So that and that little bit of verjus are all going to go in here. And I've got some toasted hazelnuts, which we're just going to gently crush. So if you put them on your board, and just using the saucepan, cold one, just gently crush your hazelnuts. So you don't want them fine, but what they do is they just split them in half. You still want a little bit of texture. They will now go into our bowl. Okay, that's done. So I'm going to pour that straight onto my bread. So using a spoon, we'll just mix it through a little bit first. Mix all those flavours together. And then what you'll notice is with your hand, when you pick it up, you can just sort of squash it together a little bit and it'll hold its shape. So now what we want to do is I have some foil and some greaseproof paper. So I'm going to put my stuffing in here, and we're going to roll it up like a log. You want to take the whole thing. The baking paper just stops your stuffing from sticking to the foil. So you want to roll that up nice and tight. And then we're going to twist the ends to make it nice and tight. And it just looks like a little bonbon. And then that will go in the oven, and you roast that in the oven for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes before you want to serve it. And that you can prepare the day before and just leave it in the fridge till you need it. Okay, so one thing that's really important when doing your potatoes is you heat your duck fat up. So I've just heated up my duck fat in the oven, so it'll be really hot, be careful. So our potatoes, you just gently pop them straight into this hot oil. And you just want to give them a coat in oil. And then they're going into a 200-degree oven to crisp up and finish off their cooking. Salt, just sea salt, the cracked pepper, and if you wish you can put some herbs on it as well, some rosemary. So I'm going to put that in the oven now, my 200-degree oven, and let them roast away. We're going to make a really simple salad to go with our pork. So being summer, we want things nice and fresh, and this is probably one of my favourite combinations. I'm using a little bit of some seasonal fruit, nuts, butter lettuce, which I really like, and we're going to make a beautiful dressing with some raspberry vinegar and hazelnut oil. So those sorts of flavours will help cut through the fat of the pork, and they really quite complement the dish because the pork, the meat is so rich, and also, you know, you've got your roasted duck fat potatoes, which also it's really nice to cut through the fat with some fruit. So I've got on here my a skillet, and we're going to just char the cheeks of the nectarines. So I have, the nectarines are quite firm because you don't want them to go all mushy once you've cooked them. So they're ripe, they're just firm. And we're just going to char one side just to give it a nice pattern on it. I've put a little bit of oil on it. I'll just let those go. So while they're charring, I'm going to make my dressing. So the really important thing with dressing too is you don't saturate your lettuce leaves in the dressing. So we'll start with a little bit of hazelnut oil, some beautiful raspberry vinegar. So this vinegar actually has raspberry through it, real raspberries. So we're going to put a little bit of that in too. And I'm going to put a little bit of mustard. I quite like grain mustard, but you can also use Dijon if you wish. Pinch of salt, cracked pepper. We're just going to whisk that up just to create an emulsion with your oil and vinegar. And then what we're going to do is, with our butter lettuce, you just want the heart of the lettuce. That's the sort of the sweetest, a little bit delicate. So we're going to put the leaves into our dressing and gently just coat the leaves. And then we're going to put the salad together into another bowl. So you pop your lettuce in. So you do this obviously right at the end when you're ready to serve. You assemble it together. So what I've got is some blanched beans, some fresh raspberries, some roasted hazelnuts, so our charred nectarine and our butter lettuce. So then you want to put some beans into here as well, and just gently coat your beans and then arrange those on top of your salad. Your hazelnuts. Again, I've just gently crushed those up, keeping texture. Some fresh raspberries. So again, if you can find the firmer raspberries, they're really good for your salad. They won't collapse and go all squishy. And then we're just going to arrange our nectarines through the salad, and there you have it, a beautiful salad ready to go. So here's our pork we've taken out of the oven. So what we'll do is I'm going to transfer that, as you can hear that beautiful crackling. I'm going to transfer that, and we'll put some foil over that just to let that rest. Then all of this, we're going to use that as bit of an accompaniment on the side. And you literally take a fork And we're just going to mash it up, and we'll put it in a serving bowl. So we'll put that to the side. So now we want to make our sauce to go with the pork. So we've got all our beautiful roasting juices in here. And what I want to do first is I'm taking some cider vinegar, and I'm just going to deglaze the pan just with a little bit of that. Okay, and I'm going to put a little bit of verjus in there. So just gently scrape your pan bits in, because that's where all the flavour is. And any onion, that's okay, we can just, that will just mush up anyway. Then I'm going to take some half a litre of chicken stock. I'm going to pour that into the pan. And we're going to let that reduce by half. So while that's reducing, I'm going to show you our spuds. So these have come up, as you can see, beautifully. So you can see that these juices are reducing beautifully. So what I'm going to do is we'll just taste it first, because we want to taste for seasoning. So you get the acid in there, you can taste a little, it's very mild, but you can taste that vinegar cutting through those beautiful juices. But what I am going to do is I'm going to add back in some of this lovely puree. And what that will do is just thicken this sauce slightly and add just a little bit of sweetness. So, and that has through it those beautiful aromas of some fennel, and you've got the sweetness of the apple and the onion caramelised in there, and then all those herbs coming through, a little bit of thyme and rosemary. So everything is quite subtle, but you can just taste them all on your palate. So I'm going to turn that off now, because that's reduced enough. Here's our pork. So the first thing we want to do is take the string off. You can hear that crackling already. So if you want to have this cold and keep crackling on, then you can do that. You just obviously let it sit overnight in the fridge. Otherwise, you can either take the crackling off, or you can carve it with the crackling on. So what I'd like to do though first is just trim that edge and just show you, so you can see in here our beautifully cooked pork. It's still moist in the middle, still lots of juice, and lovely and crackly on the outside. And here we have the feast to enjoy. So we've got our roasted porchetta with our apple and onion compote. We have our sour cherry and hazelnut stuffing, duck fat roasted potatoes, and a beautiful butter lettuce salad with grilled nectarines, raspberries, blanched beans, and roasted hazelnuts. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of the videos for 2020. And thank you so much for watching, and we hope that you've enjoyed them as much as I have making them. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year at the Essential Ingredient Paran.